Welcome to the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. Throughout my career, I've had side hustles, some of which have turned into real businesses. But first and foremost, I'm a serial technology entrepreneur. In the creator space, we hear plenty of advice on how to hustle harder and why you can sleep when you're dead. On this show, we ask new questions in hopes of getting new answers. Questions like, how can small businesses work smarter? How do you achieve balance between work and family? How can we redefine success in our businesses so that we don't burn out after year 3? Every week, I sit down with business founders at various stages of their side hustle to small business journey. These entrepreneurs are pushing the envelope while keeping their values. Keep listening for conversation, context, and camaraderie. Today's guest is Arianna Smith, a licensed psychotherapist and strategic copywriter. Having owned a mental health practice since 2016, Arianna started her side hustle as a copywriter, specializing in helping other mental health professionals in 2019. Arianna, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So I'm a little nervous having you on because I'm worried that you're going to start analyzing me or something on the show, but hopefully it doesn't get into that.
We'll see. I'm off the clock and you're not paying me.
So no free sessions, I guess, huh?
Yeah. Just there like you don't do free tech support, right?
Well, actually, I think I do a lot of free tech support. So that's not a equal comparison. So before we get into it, give us a little bit about your background and what got you to where you are today.
Yeah. Okay. So I was raised in Alaska on a tiny little homestead. And then I left Alaska, went to school, did the whole thing, college job, and then eventually went into the helping profession. And around 2016, and I always knew I wanted to be my own boss. Like, that's just the vibe of Alaskan folks. We just do what we want. Like, you don't move to Alaska to like you go up there to do what you want. So I always knew that I wanted to be my own boss. And I sometimes joke I'm like a terrible employee, a great entrepreneur. And so I started my private practice as a mental health therapist in 2016, just as a side hustle while I had my full-time job working for the Department of Human Services and Child Protection Services. And eventually I made the leap, made that part-time to full-time. And then because I like to turn hobbies into businesses, in 2019, I wanted something that was location independent because being a therapist back before the pandemic, it was very you had to go in office, you had to see clients in your office where you're at. And I was like, what can I do that's a little bit more remote? I wanted to have the freedom and flexibility to fly back and see my family in Alaska whenever I needed to. And I was like, why don't I just try this copywriting thing? I like writing. And since then, that I know we might talk about revenue, I was looking at my numbers before this, has tripled, in the past 4 years. And so originally it was my private practice was my full time, the copywriting was the side hustle. And then over time that just grew and grew and grew. And so I saw less and less clients. And so now the way it works is I would say copywriting is about 60%, therapy is about 40%. So I have two themes of starting it as this little side thing and growing it big.
Yeah. Okay. I got to ask you about Alaska first though, because I find it super fascinating. And I've never heard that thought that Alaskans are like natural entrepreneurs, because you don't go to Alaska to work for somebody, I suppose. But where exactly? You said a small island in Alaska?
No. I grew up outside of Wasilla, Alaska, which is near Anchorage, and on a homestead that my grandpa and great grandma homesteaded in the 50s, and then my mom was raised on that, and then me and my sister were raised on that.
Wow!
And so I was just surrounded by very independent women. I grew up watching my mom dig us out of a blizzard because the power went out and we needed to go to my grandpa's house where we could have power and running water. And she's like, all right, let's fire up the snowblower or the snowplow or,
wow.
So just raised, and also all my aunts. So just raised around really independent, self-sufficient women that do what they want.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Super, super interesting. We visited Alaska some years ago, and it is just a beautiful state.
Yes.
Of course, we went in the summertime, and
Yes.
that really does throw you off, by the way, because we kept rolling into places at 11 o'clock at night for dinner because the sun was still up, and then not realizing it was 11 o'clock. And they're like, we're closing. I'm like, but what? What do you mean? So, okay. So, first entrepreneurial experience was starting up the side hustle of the practice. How did you figure that out for yourself and working for the government, really, like working for HHS? That's kind of it's a super full-time gig, right? Like, and it can be draining. Like, how did you fit that in?
Yeah. So I just started with whatever evenings I could do. So I would try to keep my full-time gig like during the day if I could, but I also was like working with families, so sometimes in the evening. So I just started with like one evening a week. Actually, it was weekends. Let me take that back. I started with weekends, and then I did weekends and like evenings a week. And then what I actually did that I didn't do with my copywriting business is I was like, okay, I'm reaching this point that this has the potential to grow to part-time, full-time, but there's a limit on how much it can grow while I still have this full-time practice. And so I saved up enough, like 6 months worth of savings, and I made the leap. And I said, okay, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to fill my practice in 6 months. And I filled it in 3. And so that was kind of how I had to do it the first time. There just reaches a growth point where you kind of have to take the leap in order to create more space. Potentially. I mean, I could have done it on the side forever, but that wasn't sustainable for me at that time.
Right. How is it that you found when it was the side hustle and then when you went full time, find clients in both of those phases for yourself?
So I was on directories when I was just kind of a side hustle. And so I specialize in working with like highly sensitive people, neurodivergent folks. And so there was this very, very niche directory that served them. And back then, I was one of the few people that did. And so just the fact that I served that population was enough to get me referrals. And then once I expanded to full-time, I got clients also from that directory, from my website, which is how I ended up going to copywriting. I was just like getting a lot of referrals from my website and people resonating with what I wrote. Word of mouth. So I connected with a lot of referral partners. So I was like, okay, I want to connect with couples therapists because they probably need to know an individual person that does this.
That makes sense. Okay. And so did it change at all when you decided to go all in, burn the boats and go all in and make the side hustle a full-time thing?
I mean, I think a lot of entrepreneurs like a little risk. Like we like to be scared. Like we do and we don't. And so I loved the challenge. Like I loved the clear and I was so motivated. I never wanted to work for anyone again.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I have to make this work.
Yeah.
So it was exciting. It was scary, but I just was like determined and I had to do it.
Yeah. Okay. So then let's talk about the copywriting that kind of grows out of this. When did you realize that was a thing for yourself? Like, obviously you kind of fine-tuned it for your website and started drawing people in. When did you realize like, oh, I'm actually really good at this. Let me do this as a hustle.
I don't honestly entirely remember. I think I just I started hanging out in more business communities with therapists. And I just noticed that it was something that folks really, really struggled with. And that actually came pretty natural to me. And so it wasn't necessarily like, I was like, oh, I'm going to be a copywriter. It was more, I was in spaces and I was seeing a problem and I was like, oh, I can actually help people with this problem. Right.
Yeah. Did nobody came up to you and said like, hey, can you help me with this first? Or it was you recognizing it?
I think someone posted in maybe a Facebook group that was like, hey, I'm looking for a copywriter. And I was like, okay, I will write your entire website. This is my first time doing it for literally $500. I wrote my first website for $500, which was a lot at the time for this, And so then from there, like more and more people, I was like, yeah, I do this. And so more and more people asked, or I tell them what I do. Eventually, I think I made like a website. I did some like presentations around copywriting. I took some courses. So I just was like, oh, this is really interesting to me. And I think the pivotal moment, honestly, now that I'm remembering all these years ago, was I'm like, what would I never get tired of learning about? And that was a deciding factor for me, as I was like, because I had a couple different paths I could go. I was like, what could I never get tired of learning about? And it was around words and messaging and communication and buyer psychology and all of those things.
Yeah. Thinking back to it now, that first website, the $500, how many hours did you put in? Like, what was your hourly rate on that?
Stop. I did the math. I think it was like $5 an hour, maybe. Because I also I didn't know how to set expectations around how many revisions. And even, and I didn't say like, okay, this is the end of the project. So it was like a year later that they reached out and they're like, hey, can you revise this? And I, of course, was like, sure. And like, didn't get paid, so I had a lot of learning edges around boundaries around that, which now I have since learned to be like, hey, this is the expectations. Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, it was really negative. I really was paying that person to write.
Right. But it gave you something to put in the portfolio and be like, look what I've done. So, I mean, there's that benefit. So now if you look at it with where the business is now on the copywriting side, what do you get on an hourly basis on average? What do you think?
I would say I try to aim for like 175 an hour. Usually,
it's a lot better than $5 an hour. So that's good.
So like, and that's for, I mean, it might be less than that depending on the project. I'm really motivated to like do a good job, but when I'm pricing like retainer packages, I'm really trying to go in that 125, 175, maybe even 200 range, because unlike other copywriters, I bring a clinical background. So I'm bringing my training as, a master's level clinician. Like I'm bringing a lot in that respect. So as I've been moving through as a copywriter, initially I didn't make as much as I was as a therapist, but over time, I would say it took me, a couple years to get my copywriting business to a place where the hourly was equivalent to being a therapist, but also being a copywriter is so much less emotionally taxing than being a therapist. So it was like a good trade-off. I'm like, my hourly rate is lower, but also I can do more. Like I can do more with that.
Right. Yeah. Do you feel like that has, it sounds like it has really given you this benefit by being experienced in this field that you're copywriting for? And in what ways have you seen that be really valuable for you?
I mean, I think the fact that my business like took off says it. Like the fact that it like tripled, like I was looking at my number, like really the only thing that hindered it growth was not the referrals. It was that I was still seeing therapy clients and I had a limited capacity. And I think this is what mirrored, what happened initially with my therapy practice. Like when you have a side hustle, like you have limitations. So I think what I am excited to do as a copywriter for therapists is I translate clinispeak. So a lot of therapists speak in jargon. They're writing their copy to other therapists, it's very jargony or it's very clinical or academic. But what we know about copywriting is we want to aim for like a 7th grade reading level, and not to dumb it down, but to make it really easy for folks to read because they're overwhelmed. So I was able to kind of translate the clinispeak and understand, I often ask folks, and now I'm going to get jargony. I'm like, tell me how you conceptualize your ideal client. What are the modalities you use? So I often speak to them as a colleague, as a therapist, and then I funnel it through my copywriting brain, just be like, okay, here's how we can do this. The other thing is, even before I've been in the helping field, for almost 20 years. And so without a doubt, whenever someone is coming to me for a copywriting project, I'm like, oh, I've sat with someone like that before. Mm-hmm. Like I've sat with either this parent, I've sat with someone. And so I also pull on my own visceral experience to write copy for that so that it's not just strategic, it's also intuitive and heartfelt.
Yeah. What's interesting to me here is that your client-based, other therapists, they are paid to sit and talk with people. right?
Yeah.
And yet when they turn around and do their websites, which is to talk to people, they don't do a good job of that. Like, why do you think there's that disconnect? Because I mean, these people should be, in theory, should be good at this, but they're not.
I think some are good, but I think what I often teach folks is problem awareness. And so often what therapists are speaking to their clients when they've already completed therapy. So they're writing their website copy as if their ideal client already knows that the reason that they're fighting with their partner is their unresolved childhood trauma and they need it for that, right? And so we often have to take it a step back and write copy to the clients where they're at now.
Yeah.
So that's what and so the biggest work I do with therapists is I was like, okay, what do they see as the problem? You know, are they seeing that it's this? No. Okay. Then we need to write copy to what they're seeing it is at.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Is there anything else that you see therapists do kind of on the marketing side that they don't do a good job at and they could do better to be more effective in explaining this?
Well, I think it's important to validate that you go into being a therapist because you want to be receptive. You want to be observant. Like, our job is literally behind closed doors.
Right.
And, due to confidentiality, we can't tell people about what we do. And so I feel like sometimes marketing is an antithesis to the type of personalities that are drawn to therapy. They're drawn to, folks that are drawn to therapy are like, I want to amplify other people's voices. I want to help other people. And marketing can feel really selfish. It can feel really salesy. It can feel very much like, look at me, look at me, look at me. And I also think that therapists are really sensitive. I think some marketing advice is really coercive. And I think therapists are really sensitive to I don't want to coerce my clients into working with me.
Right.
So I think it's partially that the main message around marketing is just kind of antithetical to the way we want to be in the world as therapists. But in order to be a therapist, you have to market. So it is a real tension that we have to walk.
Yeah. Are you even a therapist if you have no clients? I mean, exactly. Right. So you kind of have to get out there. Okay. So you mentioned the time shift has happened over time for you as you started this up, and now you're kind of 60% copywriting, 40% clinical. How do you figure that balance out for yourself to make it right? Is it, you have so many trips to Alaska that you want to do, and then this is the requirement? How is it that you figured out this split?
So really I batch by days. So I find that the way I work is, I joke, just energetically, I can kind of be a juggernaut and just do you know that Marvel reference? No, maybe not.
Oh yeah.
Someone on there. Yeah.
I get it. But I'm a comic book nerd, but you know.
I joke that sometimes I can just be the juggernaut of just once in motion, I stay in motion. And so honestly, the hardest thing for me is transitioning between copywriting and clinical. And so the way I make it work is having really clear boundaries of when I'm seeing clients and when I'm doing writing work. And then also, and sometimes that's hard because I want to accommodate my client's schedule, but I can't have I need the two businesses to work in harmony.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. Do you find the copywriting helping you on the therapy side? Do you learn things by working with some of these folks?
Oh, yes. Sometimes I know we were joking about I was paying someone to write their website. Sometimes I feel on the other side, when I get to work with a really great copywriting client, I feel wow, I'm getting paid to learn something. I'm getting paid to advance my clinical skills. So, I learn about whoever I'm working with. So I did a group. So I have a client that their group practice focuses on EFT, emotionally focused therapy. I'm learning so much about that with writing her newsletter, writing her private practice newsletter. When I was doing a group practice that was a sex therapy practice, I learned so much about that. So really anyone I work with, I'm going to learn from it. And I feel a little guilty because I'm like, oh my gosh, like technically they're paying me, but I am getting a lot out of this.
Yeah. It's such an interesting kind of symbiotic thing that you've built with these two things.
Yes.
Has there ever been a time where you've picked up something from a client on copywriting and you're like, oh, I need to do this in my practice, or I need to, start offering these services in my practice, or figuring out a way to do this for clients, for therapy clients?
I mean, really, with this client that is trained in EFT, I'm like, oh, it's blowing my mind just around attachment. And I'm like, oh, I really need to get more training in attachment. So that has been the one that's been standing out. But I also feel really clear in my niche and like who I work with. So it's not necessarily like, oh, I need to go be that. But it's like, oh, how can that inform my work with my current clients so that I know what's within my scope or not?
Right. Yeah. It sounds like, so you started out as website copy, but now it sounds like you're also doing newsletters and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So like, what's kind of the breadth of stuff that you get involved with, and how do your clients on the copywriting side now find you?
Yeah. So I really love any words for someone's business. That's what I say. If it's words for your business. So if it's a podcast pitch, if it's a bio, if it's a sales page, if it's a lead magnet, if it's website copy, I think the bulk of what I get is website copy, because that is typically what people, that's what's the most important for folks to be on online presence. And then let's see, what was your second question? You had two questions.
How do clients usually find you?
Find me.
Yeah.
Usually I would say, I actually tracked this. I would say maybe 60 to 70% is like word of mouth.
Okay.
And then actually most recently, 2 people found me through ChatGPT. They asked ChatGPT, I'm looking for a copywriter that blah, blah, blah. And I was like,
interesting.
What? Yeah, they found me that way. I'd say random people maybe find me through Google or something, but it's very much word of mouth.
That is interesting, the ChatGPT thing. And I wonder what web page it's pulling off of to provide that information. So that's pretty neat.
My homepage, because I asked this. I asked her, and then I tried it myself.
Well, no, I'm saying ChatGPT is probably pulling it from somewhere.
Yes.
Maybe, you think it's pulling it from your homepage?
Yeah, from my website.
Okay. Because that was the reference in the thing. In the response. So interesting.
It looks like it's pulled also maybe from some of my, I'm not super SEO savvy, but it looks like it also pulls a little bit from my SEO.
Okay.
Just from my, I don't even know what the right is. Alt text, maybe? It's not that.
Yeah.
It's something else. Excerpts, maybe. Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
Oh, that's your tech brain. That's like, I wonder what they're pulling from.
I'm going to have to go into the AIs and start asking questions about you and see what it has to say. That's super interesting. And something that I don't know that I've heard many people talk about, I'm sure some people have, in terms of trying to do marketing for yourself, to like orient it in such a way such that AI uses your business as a response to a question like that. That's a very smart thing to do.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you see kind of time and time again with clients, that advice that you give them, and maybe regardless of it being kind of mental health or whatever, like, is there something that you see all the time that you're like, oh, this is just not good, don't do that?
Therapists really love to be inclusive. And this goes back to the tension between like the ethos of being a therapist and like the ethos of marketing. As a therapist, we like want to be inclusive. We want to be welcoming. We want to ensure everyone belongs. From a copywriting side of things, I see a lot of therapists, they're trying to write their copy to everyone. And that shows up as one as having like a really general niche, or it shows up more granular in the language of like, maybe you, perhaps you, and I'm like, and I'm really about having more clear language than that. Because I'm like, if you're guessing if they feel that way, they're not going to be excited to reach out to you, So that is probably the global thing I see. And it comes from a fear of not getting clients, right? Like, I don't want to exclude anyone. I don't want to alienate anyone. But what we know is that the more specific you are, especially if you're a private pay therapist, the more likely you are to get aligned clients.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you have to almost do therapy on your clients, on the copywriting clients, to get them to that point, to make them understand that having that specificity is actually better for them?
You know, I was just talking about this. I say, can I be completely bossy with you? Like I've stepped in a little bit more around just being, but I think now that the world has, like the marketing world for therapists has shifted enough is that they understand that. They get it, you know?
Yeah.
But in the early days, yes, it was hard. And so sometimes I had projects where I'd be like, here's how I want to write it. And they would like completely edit it. And then I'm like, this is not going to work, but I'm going to write it this way. And I was like, okay, you basically just paid me to write copy that you could have written, but now you feel better about it because the copywriter wrote it. But I also didn't really write it
because you edited it all.
Yeah, because because it kind of went against just best practices. So now I don't really bring on clients unless I'm like, hey, will you let me be bossy? Will you let me lean on my expertise? But before I didn't know how to stand on my own around that, but now I do.
Yeah. Did you ever have to fire a client on the copywriting side? Like, because they just weren't, it wasn't going to work because they just had that kind of idea.
I think I had negative experiences that I completed because I was assigned a contract.
Right.
And then I just got really, really better at screening on the front end.
Okay.
And I got really better at almost being like a little repellent and like having calls and just being like, but I think now people know me enough, like people that are finding me through word of mouth, they usually research me, they're on my newsletter. They know me enough that that's what they want. They want someone who is like, hey, I know how to do this.
Yeah. I want to talk real quick about like the client base that you have on the two businesses. So on the therapy side, are they all in person? Are they remote? And then on the copywriting side, the same thing. Are they like, how far away are these therapists that you're working with on the copywriting side?
Yeah. Okay. So my therapy clients pre-pandemic were in person down where I was. And now I would say it's mostly virtual because it's been very convenient for folks.
Yeah.
And I also only see therapy clients during business hours. So it's hard for people to come to appointments during that, which is fine. Like they can choose that. And then I have some in-person clients that I really enjoy working with. And then for copywriting clients, those tend to be like all over. And those tend to be more spread across the world. I do have some that are here locally. And when I do, that's a lot of fun. And then actually I just had one. It's a lot of fun because then I can tap into my Denver network to kind of support them after we're done with the project. So I just wrote a bunch of copy for a group practice that also offers yoga therapy. And so then and then I also host like networking gatherings for therapists in the summer. And I was like, hey, I know so much about your practice. Like, will you host like a yoga workshop can we do like a yoga networking event? So when the copywriting clients are local, I tend to try to, well, and even when they're not, I have a little bit more that I can send them referrals. So there's a little bit more I can do there and be colleagues with them. But I would say 90% are not local to Colorado.
Yeah. What's the furthest away client that you've ever had? And has it surprised you, like how they found you or whatever?
Ooh.
Because you said around the world, and I was like,
most
surprised
are in the US.
Okay.
I don't know if I get too many people in the UK. Because the words are different.
Right.
Yeah. Like, cause the words are different. And so I don't know if it's ever like furthest away, but it is typically folks that are not local. And maybe I had someone from Australia reach out. It's sometimes the time zone stuff is hard, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And definitely to your point, like the words kind of matter, like the way that you spell it and the way that you form the sentences, like depends on your your target
Yeah.
market there. So,
Yeah. And the therapy market is different in the US than other parts of the world. So
right.
actually, as I think this through, I'm like, oh, yeah, that makes sense. I mostly just get US folks because we're working with a really messed up system and, that we have to navigate.
Yeah. Yeah. So looking back now, it's been a few years on all of this stuff, on both of the businesses. Is there anything that you think about and you're like, man, if I could go back in time and do this differently, this is how I do it differently? There's probably a lot of them. Did you like pick one for me that's good?
Yeah. I think honestly, not to try so hard. I think there was a lot of ways. I know this sounds weird. I think there was a lot of ways that I really tried to force things when I could have just let them like flowed to me or like taken their time to grow. And so I wish I would have just like trusted a little bit more, but I couldn't have known that. I couldn't have known that at the time. And I wish I would have trusted a little bit more because a lot of the things that like went wrong in my business or the clients that weren't a good fit were because I had this like gut feeling that I ignored. And I'm still learning that to this day to like not ignore that gut feeling of like, oh, I don't think this is the right fit or anything like that.
Yeah. Do you think that's because of that thing that you talked about a little while ago of like just kind of being desperate for clients and like, what if they never come? And so this is one that's coming. So let me do it.
Yeah, there definitely can be scarcity, and what's tricky is, and I guess this would be and I was talking about this the other day, as therapists and also small business owners, sometimes we can do emotional reasoning. There's a clinical term where what we feel feels like fact. And so we're like, if things feel scarce, if I haven't gotten a referral in a week, that means I'm going out of business forever, So that would be what I wish I could have gotten more support on is that I could trust in the ebb and flow of business, which, is a process because the world is always changing.
Right. Yeah. Interesting. I'm going to have to think about that one for a bit, about the feelings being reality and maybe they're not so much reality.
Yeah.
And I think that is reality for most entrepreneurs, right?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, especially when we hit the lows, right?
Yes.
I feel like entrepreneurs, we amplify the lows more than we amplify the highs.
Yes.
Right?
There's a lot of scarcity mindset work that you have to do as an entrepreneur. And you really do, because maybe you took on a client that like wasn't a good fit. And then like 2 weeks later, you get someone that is a great fit, but you don't have the space. Right. Because you didn't trust. And like that client could have done this. And I actually had this experience where, I had like a slow period and I was feeling really nervous. And then I trusted and I got a client referral that now has been a client, like a retainer client for like over 2 years.
Wow.
And because I like trusted the lull and trusted the slowness and trusted that the effort I had put into my business was going to bring aligned referrals, I was able to say yes to that. I was able to start immediately, which is what they needed. And now I'm an integral part of their business.
Yeah, that's super, super interesting. And glad you had that experience, and hopefully that reinforces the lull and kind of taking a beat every now and again. Okay, last question for you. If you were talking to somebody who's thinking about doing what you did and launching a side hustle and then eventually turning that side hustle into a full-time business, what advice would you give to them?
I would advise them to have a safety net, like to understand at one point you are going to hit a painful growth point where you either need to create more space in your schedule to grow this so that it can have more income, or you need to let it be what it is. So I think maybe the lesson is like, not all side hustles have to grow. Sometimes they get to be what they are. If it is going to be a small business, you are going to have some trade-offs on your time and energy around that. And also honor that a lot of the traditional advice out there is not realistic for most people. Like, it takes years for businesses to grow. And we get sold this lie, I feel like, that, you can just make six figures in 6 weeks. And I'm like, that's not how it works for most people. So that would be my 3-part advice.
Yeah. Arianna, this has been fantastic. Where can our listeners find and connect with you online?
The best place to find me is ariannasmith.com. That's where I do all my copywriting. And then also my private practice, if you're in Colorado, is quietmooncounseling.com.
Awesome. Thanks so much for being on the show today.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Side Hustle to Small Business podcast, powered by Hiscox. To learn more about how Hiscox can help protect your small business through intelligent insurance solutions, visit hiscox.com. And to hear more side hustle to small business stories or share your own story, visit hiscox.com/side hustle to small business. I'm your host, Sanjay Parekh. You can find more about me at my website, sanjayparekh.com.